A lost world swallowed by the sea has captivated humanity for centuries. The legend of Atlantis, first told by the philosopher Plato, might not be a complete fantasy. We are going to uncover how a genuine, ancient cataclysm could have inspired this timeless story. By the end of our journey, you will see the Atlantis myth not as mere fable, but as a possible echo of a real historical tragedy. We will examine the ashes of a colossal volcanic eruption and the ruins of a sophisticated civilization that vanished almost overnight. How does a real disaster become a legendary tale? Our journey into the lost world of Atlantis begins not with an ancient map, but with a philosophical text. Around 360 years before the Common Era, the Greek thinker Plato wrote two dialogues, Timaeus and Critias. In these works, he lays out the entire foundation of the story. He describes a formidable island kingdom situated beyond the Pillars of Hercules, what we know today as the Strait of Gibraltar. This was not some idyllic paradise, but a militaristic power that launched an unprovoked war against the city of Athens. According to Plato, the gods punished this hubris, and the entire island of Atlantis was swallowed by the sea in a single day and night of misfortune. It is a dramatic and complete destruction. Crucially, Plato frames this not as a fable, but as a true account. He claims the tale was passed down to the Athenian lawgiver Solon by Egyptian priests, a lineage meant to grant it historical weight. The description is remarkably detailed. He writes of a magnificent capital city built from concentric rings of land and water, connected by great canals and bridges. The society possessed advanced engineering and immense wealth, but its people became arrogant and morally corrupt. This specific blend of geographical detail, technological marvel, and a clear moral about the dangers of hubris makes the account strangely compelling. Why would a philosopher of Plato's stature go to such lengths to describe a fictional place with such precision? It is this very specificity that has fueled the search for centuries, suggesting he might have been recording a genuine, though undoubtedly embellished, historical tradition. The legend of Atlantis is far from the only ancient tale of a world erased by water. From the Mesopotamian epic of Gilgamesh to the biblical account of Noah's Ark, cultures separated by vast oceans tell strikingly similar stories of a great deluge. A divine warning, a chosen few surviving in a vessel, and the terrifying reset of humanity are themes that echo across continents. This remarkable consistency points to something profound. It is as if a deep, collective memory of a cataclysm was seared into the human psyche, passed down through generations until it was woven into the fabric of mythology. What could have left such a universal scar? Geological evidence strongly suggests a culprit: the dramatic rise in sea levels that occurred as the last ice age receded. Vast coastal plains that were once home to human settlements were slowly, and sometimes rapidly, swallowed by the rising oceans. These were not just minor floods, but transformative events that permanently changed the map of the world and erased the homelands of countless communities. The stories of a great flood, therefore, are not mere fables. They are the lingering echoes of a real and widespread trauma, a shared narrative of loss that our ancestors carried with them as they moved inland. Against this backdrop, the story of Atlantis finds its true home. It is not an isolated mystery, but rather the Mediterranean's specific and detailed contribution to this global chorus. Plato's description of an advanced civilization sinking beneath the waves in a single day fits the pattern perfectly, a localized legend built upon the universal human experience of catastrophic sea level rise. This shared memory of water washing away the old world provides the fertile ground from which the most enduring legend of a lost civilization could grow. That universal memory of rising seas sets the stage for a very specific and devastating event in the Mediterranean. Around the year 1600 before the Common Era, a remarkable civilization thrived on the island now known as Santorini. Then it was called Thura, and it was a jewel of the Minoan world. This was not a primitive society. The Minoans were master seafarers and artists, their palaces sprawling across the Aegean with complex architecture and vibrant frescoes depicting a peaceful, prosperous life. Thura itself was a bustling hub, a center of trade and culture perched on a volcanic island. Then the earth tore itself apart. The volcano at the heart of Thura unleashed one of the most powerful eruptions in human history. The force of the blast is almost impossible to comprehend. It was hundreds of times more powerful than the eruption that buried Pompeii. The entire central part of the island collapsed in on itself, instantly vanishing into a deep, watery abyss and creating the vast caldera that defines Santorini's landscape today. For the people living there, the end was swift and absolute. The initial explosion would have been deafening, followed by a rain of superheated ash and rock. Then, as the colossal void left by the collapsed volcano was flooded by the sea, a series of immense tsunamis radiated outward. These walls of water, some estimates suggest over 100 feet high, would have smashed into the surrounding coasts, obliterating Minoan settlements on nearby Crete and reaching as far as the shores of Egypt. The vibrant culture of Thura was extinguished in a single, terrible day. The parallels to Plato's story are simply too striking to ignore. Here was an advanced island civilization, sophisticated and wealthy, utterly destroyed by a cataclysm from both the earth and the sea. Its heart was literally swallowed by the waves, leaving behind a broken ring of land. This was not a slow rise of sea levels, but a sudden, violent, and apocalyptic event that would have been seared into the memory of every surviving culture in the region. Could the fate of Thura be the historical kernel of truth that, after centuries of retelling, eventually transformed into the legend of a lost Atlantis? This geological diary of the planet is written in layers of ice and stone. Deep within ice cores drilled from the ancient glaciers of Greenland, scientists have found a distinct, dark band of volcanic ash, a silent timestamp from the distant past. This same chemical fingerprint appears in sediment cores pulled from the seabed across the Aegean, creating a precise chronological marker. The global reach of this event becomes even clearer when we look at tree ring records from ancient forests, which show a sudden, severe period of stunted growth. These rings tell a story of cold years and darkened skies, a volcanic winter triggered by the immense volume of ash Thura hurled into the atmosphere. Remarkably, these environmental hardships are echoed in records from the other side of the world, where Chinese chronicles from the same era note unusual celestial dimness and prolonged periods of cold. This worldwide testimony confirms a climate catastrophe. Back at the source, the scale of the collapse is written into the very landscape of Santorini. Geological surveys of the caldera reveal the staggering void left when the island's center plummeted into the sea. This was not a simple landslide, but a structural failure of the entire volcanic cone, an event of such raw power it permanently reshaped the Earth. This convergence of evidence from ice, wood, water, and rock forms an undeniable case. We are not dealing with a vague legend, but with a documented geological event of apocalyptic proportions. The Earth itself provides the physical proof for a disaster powerful enough to echo through the ages. So, if the cataclysm is real, how did its memory travel across centuries to reach the ears of a Greek philosopher? The sheer force of the Thura eruption did more than darken skies, it physically moved the sea. As the volcano's core collapsed into the caldera, it displaced an unimaginable volume of water, generating a mega-tsunami that radiated outward like a shockwave. Imagine a wall of water taller than a 10-story building racing across the open ocean at the speed of a jet plane. This was not a single wave, but a series of them, each one gathering force as it approached the shallow coastal shelves. When this mountain of water finally reached the northern coast of Crete, the heartland of the Minoan Civilization, it hit with the force of a planetary hammer. Archaeological digs along that coastline tell a silent, brutal story. They reveal a distinct destruction layer, not from fire or earthquake, but from a sudden, violent inundation. Stone buildings were smashed into rubble, their foundations scoured clean. Grand harbors, once bustling with Minoan trading ships, were utterly erased, swept away, and buried under thick deposits of sea sand and marine shells. This is the debris field of a single, catastrophic event, a clear geological signature of a wave that turned the Minoan source of wealth and power into an instrument of their ruin. Here we find the physical mechanism for Plato's single day and night of misfortune. The legend speaks of the sea swallowing a great kingdom, and on the shores of Crete, we see the evidence of how that could have literally happened. The very element that connected and sustained this advanced culture became, in a few terrifying hours, the cause of its absolute collapse. This was not a slow environmental change, but a sudden, apocalyptic strike from the ocean, an event so traumatic its memory would inevitably be seared into the regional consciousness for generations to come. To grasp their significance, we must first walk the labyrinthine corridors of their greatest palace, Knossos. This was not a fortress of grim, defensive walls, but a sprawling, open complex of courtyards and light wells, a testament to a society confident in its power and security. The Minoans engineered Europe's first known paved roads and sophisticated plumbing systems with running water, amenities that would not become common for over 1,000 years. Their vibrant frescoes depict a world alive with motion, leaping dolphins, elegant court ladies, and acrobats vaulting over bulls. This art reveals a culture deeply connected to the sea and nature, one that valued grace and athleticism over scenes of conquest. Their influence stretched far beyond their island shores. Minoan pottery, distinct with its swirling octopus and marine motifs, has been found in ancient ports from Egypt to the Italian coast. They were the undisputed masters of the Bronze Age Mediterranean, their merchant ships a common sight, carrying olive oil, exquisite ceramics, and saffron across the known world. This was a thalassocracy, a powerful empire built not on conquered land, but on controlled sea lanes and prosperous trade. The parallels to Plato's description of a wealthy, advanced, and sophisticated island kingdom are undeniable. Here was a civilization that, in its peak, embodied the very essence of Atlantean grandeur. Then, around the middle of the second millennium before the Common Era, this brilliant culture entered a period of rapid and irreversible decline. Major palaces were damaged, some rebuilt on a smaller scale, and their far-reaching trade networks began to fray. The historical record grows faint, pointing to a profound and sudden crisis. What could possibly have crippled such a dominant maritime power so completely? The timeline of their decline points directly toward the Cataclysm at Thura, suggesting their fate was inextricably linked to the volcano's fury. But how could the memory of this Aegean disaster survive for nearly 1,000 years before being recorded by Plato? The answer may lie not in Greece, but along the fertile banks of the Nile. Plato himself provides a crucial clue in his dialogues. He states that the story was brought to Athens by his own ancestor, the revered lawgiver Solon, who supposedly heard it during his travels to Egypt. According to the tale, Egyptian priests in the city of Sais shared an ancient account of a great civilization that had fallen into the sea. For a long time, historians dismissed this as a convenient literary device, a way for Plato to lend his story an air of antiquity. Yet this Egyptian connection is far more compelling than it first appears. The Egyptians were legendary record keepers, their temples functioning as libraries of human and divine history. Their civilization also had direct and prolonged contact with the Minoan world. We know from frescoes in Egyptian tombs and from Minoan artifacts found in the Nile Delta that these two powerful cultures were active trading partners. The vibrant Keftiu, as the Egyptians called the Minoans, were familiar figures in Egyptian art and records. Is it possible that Egyptian scribes, witnessing the sudden and catastrophic collapse of their distant trading partners, wrote about the event? Imagine the scene in the great port cities of Egypt. For generations, the distinctive ships of the Keftiu had been a common sight. Then they simply stopped coming. The flow of exquisite Minoan pottery, precious oils, and other goods ceased. At the same time, strange reports would have filtered in from sailors, tales of a distant island shattered by fire and of immense waves that scoured distant coasts. The Egyptian priests, in their role as historians, would have had every reason to record such a momentous geopolitical shift, the mysterious disappearance of a major maritime power. The name Atlantis itself is Greek, not Egyptian. This is a key piece of the puzzle. Some researchers propose that the original Egyptian story likely referred to the lands of the Keftiu or to people from the sea. When Solon heard this ancient tale centuries later, he would have naturally translated and adapted it into terms his Greek audience would understand, perhaps coining the name Atlantis for this lost island kingdom. This transmission route provides a perfectly plausible path for a distorted historical memory. A real catastrophe affecting the Minoans is recorded in Egypt. That record survives for centuries in temple archives. It is then relayed to a visiting Greek statesman, Solon, who brings the story home. It is then passed down through his family until it finally reaches Plato, who weaves it into his philosophical work. Over this long journey, the specific details of the Minoan eruption and collapse could have easily been magnified and mythologized, transforming a historical tragedy into the epic legend we know today. A single number has cast doubt over the entire theory for centuries. Plato was incredibly specific, stating that Atlantis fell 9,000 years before his own time. This places the Cataclysm in an impossibly distant past, around 9,600 years before the Common Era. At that time, according to everything we know from archaeology, no sophisticated, seafaring civilization with grand palaces and complex engineering could have existed anywhere in the world. This timeline is the single greatest obstacle to linking Atlantis with a real historical event like the Thura Eruption, which occurred millennia later. So, do we dismiss the entire connection because of one seemingly irrefutable number? Perhaps we should look more closely at how that number was transmitted. The story came to Plato through Solon, who heard it from Egyptian priests. This journey across languages and cultures is where a fascinating possibility emerges. In ancient Egyptian hieroglyphics, the symbols for 100 and 1000 can look remarkably similar. What if, in the translation from Egyptian to Greek, a simple but monumental mistake occurred? A scribe or interpreter could have easily misread the symbol for 100 as the symbol for 1000. If that single plausible error happened, the math changes everything. Instead of 9,000 years, the timeline becomes 900 years before Solon. This recalculates the fall of Atlantis to around 1,500 years before the Common Era. Suddenly, the date aligns almost perfectly with the volcanic destruction of Thura and the subsequent collapse of the Minoan Civilization. This is no longer a story from a mythical, non-existent age. It becomes a story from the late Bronze Age, a time we know was defined by powerful, advanced societies exactly like the one Plato described. This elegant solution transforms the greatest weakness of the theory into one of its most compelling supports. It suggests we have been searching for Atlantis in the wrong millennium all along, held back by a decimal point etched in stone thousands of years ago. Plato's mention of the Pillars of Hercules has sent countless explorers sailing into the vast Atlantic, searching for a sunken continent in the wrong ocean. But what if we have been misreading an ancient map for centuries? For the seafaring cultures of the Bronze Age, the world was a much smaller place. The Aegean Sea was their entire maritime universe, a watery stage for trade, conflict, and myth. From this perspective, the island of Thura, with its dramatic volcanic caldera, would have lain at the very edge of their known world. It could easily have been considered a land beyond their traditional horizon, a place of immense power and mystery. The term Pillars of Hercules itself might not have always referred to the Rock of Gibraltar. Some researchers propose it began as a more fluid concept, a metaphorical boundary between the civilized world and the great, terrifying unknown. Later Greek writers likely solidified its location to the strait we know today, but in the older, oral traditions that Plato could have drawn from, the idea of a boundary pillar was more symbolic than cartographic. When we shift our gaze from the open Atlantic back to the enclosed Mediterranean, the pieces of the puzzle begin to lock into place with remarkable clarity. The advanced Minoan civilization, centered on Crete with its satellite island of Thura, fits the description of a powerful maritime empire perfectly. Its sudden, catastrophic demise provides the necessary historical trauma, and its location on the edge of the Aegean world matches the spirit of Plato's geographical clue. This re-evaluation is not about moving a pin on a map, but about understanding the ancient mind. The legend of Atlantis was not born from a precise longitude and latitude, but from a memory of a place that was lost, a place that was, for all intents and purposes, beyond the known world. That world was the Mediterranean, of course. The visual resemblance is astonishing. From high above the sands of Mauritania, the Richat structure stares up at the sky like a giant, petrified bullseye. Its perfectly circular ridges and valleys look uncannily like the rings of land and water Plato so vividly described for Atlantis. This remarkable geological feature, often called the Eye of the Sahara, has captivated modern explorers, leading some to propose it as the true location of the Lost Kingdom. It is a theory built on a powerful first impression, one that seems to solve the puzzle with a single satellite image. Yet a closer look at the ground reveals a landscape of contradictions. Plato's narrative is anchored by a central, devastating event, the island's catastrophic plunge beneath the ocean waves. The Richat structure, however, lies nearly 200 miles inland, perched on a vast desert plateau. Geological studies confirm it is an eroded volcanic dome, shaped by millions of years of wind and weather, not by a sudden, tragic sinking. There is no layer of sea salt or marine debris to suggest a recent submergence, no ancient harbor walls buried in the sand. Furthermore, extensive archaeological surveys of the area have yet to uncover the remains of a sprawling Bronze Age metropolis. While there is evidence of smaller, much later human activity, there is nothing that corresponds to the immense palaces, bustling ports, and advanced engineering of a civilization capable of waging war on ancient Athens. The silence of the ruins here is profound. Without the evidence of a great cataclysm or the bones of a sophisticated society, the Richat remains a magnificent geological curiosity, a case where a compelling shape cannot compensate for a missing story. This stark contrast only serves to highlight how well the pieces fit in the Aegean, where geology, archaeology, and myth all whisper the same name. Plato's Pillars of Hercules have long been interpreted as a literal gateway at the edge of the world, the modern Strait of Gibraltar. But what if this landmark was not always so fixed in place? For the Bronze Age civilizations that thrived 1,000 years before Plato, the known world was far smaller. Their horizons were defined by the Aegean and Eastern Mediterranean, a world of island kingdoms and coastal trade routes. In that earlier era, the idea of a boundary marker could have been both more symbolic and more local. Perhaps the original pillars were not the Rock of Gibraltar, but a pair of dramatic headlands marking the entrance to a powerful kingdom's core territory, or the twin peaks of a sacred mountain on the horizon. Some researchers even point to narrow straits within the Aegean itself, like the passage between the Greek mainland and the island of Euboea, as possible candidates for an earlier, forgotten boundary. These local gateways would have served the same psychological purpose, separating the familiar, civilized sea from the mysterious and often dangerous beyond. Reimagining the pillars not as a specific location but as a concept, a mental map of the world's edge, completely changes the search for Atlantis. It frees the legend from the vast, empty Atlantic and anchors it firmly in the Mediterranean, where we know a cataclysm truly did erase an advanced society from memory. This symbolic shift turns a geographical dead end into a meaningful clue, one that points us back to the turbulent and brilliant world of the Minoans. This journey of a story across 1,000 years is a testament to the power of human memory. A tale passed from one generation to the next is not a fixed recording, but a living thing, shaped and reshaped by the voices that carry it. The memory of the Thura Eruption traveled a long and winding road before it was ever written down by Plato. It began with the terrified survivors of the Minoan world, who would have told their children of the day the sky turned to fire and the sea rose up in anger. Their descendants, scattered across the Mediterranean, kept the story alive, though the precise name of the lost island might have faded. When this tale reached the meticulous record keepers of Egypt, it was translated and formalized, its details framed through an Egyptian understanding of the world. Later, the Greek statesman Solon heard this ancient account and interpreted it through his own cultural lens, likely giving the lost land a Greek-sounding name, Atlantis. Finally, Plato, inheriting this family story, wove it into his philosophical work, using its dramatic power to illustrate a moral lesson about pride and punishment. At every step of this incredible chain, the story was vulnerable to the natural drift of oral tradition. A powerful king might become a god-like ruler. A prosperous island could be remembered as a continent. The timeline, so difficult to track across centuries, could easily stretch, placing the event in a more mythic, distant past to enhance its grandeur. The specific location, once familiar to Minoan sailors, might be repositioned to a symbolic edge of the world known to later Greeks. Yet through all these layers of change, the core of the story remained unbroken. The essential truth of a great civilization, a sudden, violent cataclysm, and a tragic loss beneath the waves proved indestructible. This resilient backbone is what connects the geological fact of Thura to the philosophical legend of Atlantis. It shows us that while the details of a myth may be embellished, its heart often beats with the rhythm of a real historical pulse. This moral dimension is the true heart of Plato's tale. He was crafting a cautionary fable for his fellow Athenians, a story about what happens when a society forgets its principles. The Atlanteans began as a virtuous people, blessed by the gods with wisdom and a just constitution. But over generations, their divine nature became diluted by human ambition. Their immense wealth and technological prowess fueled a shift in character. They grew greedy, arrogant, and hungry for dominion. This is the classic trajectory of hubris, the fatal flaw that the Greeks believed inevitably summoned divine retribution. Their unprovoked attack on Athens represents the ultimate act of imperial overreach, the point of no return for a civilization that has lost its moral compass. The sea swallowing Atlantis is not a random act of nature in Plato's telling. It is a direct consequence of their ethical failure. So where does that leave our search for a real disaster? The two ideas are not in conflict, they are complementary. A philosopher needs his audience to listen, to feel the stakes of his lesson. What better way to make a warning feel urgent and real than to root it in a story that listeners already half remember? A tale of a truly great civilization that was wiped from the earth carries a weight that pure fiction cannot. The haunting memory of Thura's destruction, a story that had echoed around the Mediterranean for centuries, provided the perfect foundation. It was a known tragedy of unimaginable scale. By weaving this historical cataclysm into his narrative, Plato gave his philosophical allegory a powerful sense of authenticity and imminent danger. He was essentially saying, this is not just a story, this has happened before. The ruins of a great power lie beneath the waves, and if we are not careful, our fate will be the same. The geological evidence and the philosophical purpose are two halves of the same puzzle, one giving historical gravity to the other's timeless warning about the fragility of civilization itself. The legend of Atlantis stands not in isolation, but as part of a powerful tradition of lost cities. For generations, the great walled city of Troy was also considered a mere myth, a poetic backdrop for Homer's epic tales of gods and heroes. That changed in the late 19th century when a determined amateur archaeologist, Heinrich Schliemann, followed the clues in the ancient texts. Against all scholarly opinion, he began digging into a mound in modern-day Turkey, and there he found it, not just one city, but multiple layers of a real, fortified settlement that had seen war and destruction. Schliemann's discovery was a revolution in thought, proving that a story once dismissed as fantasy could be built upon a foundation of historical truth. This precedent is vital. It shows us that our ancestors did not simply invent these places out of thin air. They preserved the memory of significant, real-world locations and events, even as the details were wrapped in the grandeur of legend. The case becomes even stronger when we look at a city like Pompeii. Here, the parallel is not just about a city being lost, but about the very nature of its end. The eruption of Mount Vesuvius in 79 of the Common Era did not just damage Pompeii, it froze it. In a single, terrible day, a vibrant, sophisticated Roman city was encased in volcanic ash, preserving a moment in time with heartbreaking clarity. The victims, the buildings, the graffiti on the walls, all were sealed in a tragic time capsule. This is a direct, physical example of an advanced civilization being struck down by a sudden geological cataclysm, precisely the kind of event that would be seared into human memory and retold for centuries. Perhaps the most compelling comparison, however, lies much closer to Plato's own world. The prosperous Greek city of Helike, a powerful member of the Aegean League, was utterly destroyed in the year 373 before the Common Era. According to historical accounts, a massive earthquake struck the region, followed by a gigantic wave from the sea that washed over the city and its entire surroundings. When the waters receded, Helike was gone, submerged beneath the sediment. This event, which occurred during Plato's own lifetime, would have been a major topic of conversation and fear throughout the Greek world. A prominent city swallowed by the sea in a single night provides an almost exact template for the Atlantis story. These three examples, from the rediscovery of Troy to the preserved tragedy of Pompeii and the contemporary loss of Helike, create an undeniable pattern. They demonstrate that the concept of a lost city is not a literary invention, but a recurring historical reality. They show us that sophisticated places can and do vanish, often suddenly and violently, leaving behind only echoes in the stories we tell. This pattern lends immense credibility to the idea that the legend of Atlantis is not a unique fantasy, but rather the most famous and detailed echo of a similar, real-world catastrophe, a memory of a brilliant civilization that truly did meet its end beneath the waves. The volcano's fury did not just shatter one island, it sent shockwaves through an entire age. The world of the Late Bronze Age was a surprisingly interconnected one, a cosmopolitan network of empires linked by trade and diplomacy. The Hittites in Anatolia, the Mycenaeans in Greece, the powerful New Kingdom in Egypt, and of course the Minoans, all formed a delicate web of mutual dependence. This entire system, however, began to fray and then tear apart around the year 1200 before the Common Era, in a period historians call the Late Bronze Age collapse. Across this vast region, grand palaces were burned, intricate trade routes disintegrated, and literacy itself nearly vanished. The result was a profound dark age, a centuries-long period where the light of complex society seemed to flicker and almost go out. What could cause such a widespread failure? Scholars still debate the exact recipe for this disaster. Some point to invasions by mysterious groups referred to in ancient texts only as the Sea Peoples. Others suggest a perfect storm of factors, including prolonged droughts that led to famine, internal rebellions, and a series of devastating earthquakes. It may have been a systems collapse where this fragile, interdependent network became so complex that a single shock could trigger a catastrophic domino effect. The Thura Eruption, occurring a few centuries earlier, fits into this picture as a possible first monumental domino. The tsunamis and volcanic winter it caused would have crippled the Minoans, a major economic pillar of the era. The loss of such a key player would have placed immense strain on the entire system, making it more vulnerable to the subsequent crises that followed. In the collective memory of the survivors, these separate calamities, the fall of Thura, the collapse of the Hittites, the sacking of Mycenaean citadels, could have blurred together over generations. The specific details of politics and economics faded, leaving behind a simpler, more powerful story, the memory of a golden age when many great kingdoms thrived, and a single, terrible cataclysm that swept them all away. The legend of Atlantis is not merely the story of one island's fate, but perhaps the haunting echo of an entire world that was lost. The search for Atlantis has moved from dusty libraries to the silent, sunless world beneath the waves. Today's explorers wield not ancient maps, but sophisticated technology that allows them to scan the seabed with incredible precision. Multi-beam sonar systems mounted on research vessels paint a detailed picture of the underwater terrain around Santorini, revealing the sheer scale of the volcanic collapse. These three-dimensional maps show us the dramatic slopes of the caldera and the vast debris fields that tumbled into the abyss, offering silent testimony to the island's violent fragmentation. It is like reading the geological autopsy of a disaster, a landscape forever frozen in the moment of its own destruction. This is the physical evidence of the Earth swallowing a part of itself, a process that matches the legendary description with chilling accuracy. But the investigation does not stop at mapping the surface of the seafloor. To find the human story, archaeologists send robotic emissaries into the deep. Remotely operated vehicles, or ROVs, glide through the dark water, their powerful lights piercing a world untouched by the sun for millennia. These unblinking electronic eyes are systematically searching the Aegean coastline for any trace of Minoan settlements that were caught by the tsunami's wrath. They look for the foundations of buildings, the scattered remains of pottery, or the telltale shapes of harbor walls now lying in silent, watery graves. While no sprawling circular city has been discovered, each new scan and every dive adds another piece to the puzzle. These technologies are helping scientists reconstruct the pre-eruption landscape of Thura, a lost world buried under layers of volcanic ash and sea sediment. We are slowly building a digital ghost of the island as it was, understanding where its people lived and how the cataclysm rewrote their geography. This painstaking work brings us face to face with the sheer power of the event, allowing us to measure its devastation not in legend, but in the cold, hard data of submerged cliffs and vanished coastlines. The legend of Atlantis persists not because we have found it, but because we are afraid of losing everything we have built. It is a story that resonates with our most profound anxieties about the world around us. We look at our own modern civilization with its towering cities and complex technologies, and we see a reflection of that ancient, advanced kingdom. The fear that a sudden geological event or a rapid shift in our climate could undo it all is a very modern dread, yet it finds its perfect echo in this ancient tale. This is not just a story about the past, it is a cautionary mirror held up to our own future. The legend warns us that no society, no matter how brilliant or powerful, is immune to the forces of nature or to the consequences of its own arrogance. When Plato wrote of the Atlanteans falling from grace through greed and imperial ambition, he was describing a pattern we recognize all too well: the danger of a civilization overreaching its limits and forgetting its connection to the world that sustains it. The story's incredible versatility is another key to its longevity. For some, it is an irresistible historical puzzle, a real-world mystery waiting to be solved with a shovel or a sonar scan. For others, it is a powerful moral allegory about the rise and fall of empires, and for countless creators, it has become a template for speculative fiction, a foundational myth for stories about ancient astronauts, sunken kingdoms, and forgotten wisdom. Atlantis endures because it is not one single story. It is a vessel, empty and waiting to be filled with whatever meaning we need it to hold. It speaks to a fundamental human longing for a lost golden age, and a deep-seated fear that our own age may one day be lost as well. And yet, for all the compelling connections, the theory faces significant and valid challenges. A truly robust investigation requires us to sit with the skeptics and listen to their objections. The most immediate question is one of silence. Despite extensive excavations on both Thura and Crete, not a single Minoan tablet, fresco, or piece of pottery has been found that explicitly names Atlantis or graphically depicts its cataclysmic end. This is a profound silence. The Minoans left behind vivid art of dolphins and bull leapers, but no clear illustration of a city sinking beneath the waves. This absence forces us to ask, if this was their own traumatic experience, why is it not screamed from their walls? Furthermore, the sheer scale of Plato's description creates a problem. He wrote of a mighty power that attacked from beyond, an empire so vast it could threaten ancient Athens. The Minoan civilization was undoubtedly advanced and influential, a thalassocracy that controlled sea lanes. But was it a continent-spanning superpower? The archaeological evidence suggests a network of trading posts and cultural influence, not a centralized imperial state on the scale Plato imagined. This is a clear discrepancy between the archaeological footprint and the legendary one. Then there is the journey of the story itself, the path from a shattered Aegean island to the scrolls of an Athenian philosopher. The proposed route through Egyptian priests is elegant, but it remains a chain of logical inferences. We lack a specific Egyptian text that says, "We record here the destruction of the Keftiu by the sea." The entire transmission relies on a series of plausible but unproven events, a story passed through multiple languages and cultures over 1,000 years, with each retelling potentially altering key details. These are not minor quibbles, they are serious cautions from the scientific and historical community, reminders that the allure of a perfect solution can sometimes outpace the hard evidence. The link between Thura and Atlantis stands as a powerful and elegant hypothesis, the one that best fits the available pieces of the puzzle, but it is not and may never be a closed case. This acknowledgement does not weaken the theory, rather, it honors the complexity of history and the discipline of asking difficult questions. The sheer scale of the Thura disaster would have demanded an explanation far beyond human understanding. When the ground trembles and the sea rises as a single, furious entity, the only possible cause in the ancient mind was divine anger. This collective trauma likely etched itself directly into the foundational myths of the region. The Greek story of the Titanomachy, the colossal war where the Olympian gods overthrew the old Titans, reads like a geological event disguised as a divine battle. The myths speak of the world shaking to its foundations, of the seas boiling and the sky roaring, a fitting description for a civilization that had witnessed the fury of a supervolcano. It is as if the memory of the Earth itself being torn apart was repackaged into a story of cosmic regime change, a way to make sense of an indiscriminate natural force by framing it as a purposeful, moral struggle. This mythological response was not unique to Greece. Far to the south, Egyptian records and the later biblical book of Exodus describe a series of terrible plagues, darkness covering the land, and water turning bitter. These descriptions align strikingly with the known environmental aftermath of a massive volcanic eruption, the prolonged ashfall that blocks the sun and contaminates rivers. While direct causation is difficult to prove, the pattern is compelling. A disaster of this magnitude forces cultures to ask why. The answer, invariably, was that the gods were displeased. The story of Atlantis fits perfectly within this pattern. Plato's tale of a proud, advanced civilization being punished and swallowed by the sea is not just a singular legend. It is a profound philosophical contribution to this ancient conversation. It takes the raw, terrifying memory of a real cataclysm and gives it a moral framework, transforming a random act of geology into a lesson about the consequences of hubris. These myths were the ancient world's way of processing the incomprehensible, weaving the threads of real trauma into the tapestry of their beliefs to create meaning from chaos. Those vibrant Minoan frescoes, with their leaping dolphins and graceful figures, offer us a silent, beautiful glimpse into a world before the fall. This artistic legacy is the very first chapter in a long and winding story of reinterpretation. Centuries after Plato penned his dialogues, the legend lay dormant, only to be rediscovered and reimagined by thinkers and artists in entirely new contexts. During the Age of Exploration, as European mapmakers charted unknown oceans, Atlantis was often placed on their maps as a real, if elusive, continent waiting to be found. It fueled the ambitions of explorers and gave a name to the mystery of the uncharted seas. The Victorian era, captivated by technological progress and spiritualism, saw Atlantis as a utopia of lost wisdom or a cautionary tale about industrial overreach. Then came the 20th century when the legend truly exploded into popular culture. It became a staple of pulp magazines, comic books, and ultimately, blockbuster films. Each of these modern depictions is a mirror of its time, A science fiction movie might portray Atlantis as a city powered by a mysterious, crystal-based energy source, reflecting our own societal anxieties and hopes about technology and its potential for both creation and destruction. An animated film might reimagine it as a thriving, peaceful underwater kingdom, a clear echo of our growing environmental consciousness and a longing for harmony with the natural world. The core details shift with the storyteller, but the essential ingredients remain: a sophisticated society, a great cataclysm, and a world lost to the deep. This incredible journey from ancient fresco to silver screen reveals something profound about the human need for myth. A potential historical event, the destruction of Thura, provided a seed of immense emotional power. That seed was then watered by centuries of human imagination, growing into a story so versatile that every generation can find its own meaning within it. We are not just retelling an old story, we are continuously having a conversation with it, using the sunken city to explore our own deepest fears about collapse and our highest hopes for a forgotten golden age. Even with all the evidence laid out, the case remains tantalizingly open. We are left with a handful of profound questions that keep the investigation alive. Could entire Minoan coastal towns still lie hidden beneath the Mediterranean's silty floor, their stories sealed by the very tsunami that destroyed them? Or are more urban centers, perhaps even grander than we currently know, still buried under the deep layers of volcanic ash on Santorini itself, waiting for a new generation of archaeologists to uncover their secrets? The search has barely scratched the surface of the seafloor, and every new survey with advanced sonar technology brings the potential for a discovery that could reshape our understanding completely. Then there is the enduring silence from Egypt. Their meticulous records are the proposed bridge for this entire story, yet we have not found a single, definitive papyrus that names the event. Could a deeper, more nuanced analysis of hieroglyphic texts, perhaps searching for allegorical descriptions of a great wave or a distant island of fire, finally yield that crucial, corroborating mention? It is a daunting task, sifting through fragmented records for a story that would have been ancient even to the ancient Egyptians, but the possibility remains a powerful lure for historians. The geological timeline itself is still being refined. Scientists continue to drill core samples from the ice caps and the Aegean seabed, using ever more precise techniques to date the eruption down to the very year or even season. A more exact chronology could definitively link the volcanic winter from Thura to specific crop failures or societal unrest recorded in Egyptian or Mesopotamian annals, weaving the threads of cause and effect even tighter. This is not a mystery confined to one discipline. The quest to understand the roots of the Atlantis legend now drives a rare collaboration, a conversation where volcanologists share data with classicists and marine archaeologists compare notes with experts in ancient linguistics. They are not searching for a city named Atlantis, but for the shared, cataclysmic memory that could have inspired it. This interdisciplinary hunt pushes the very boundaries of how we study the past, proving that our most enduring stories often hold a kernel of truth, waiting for us to piece it back together. The fragility of the Minoan world is a mirror reflecting our own. This sophisticated society, for all its artistry and engineering, was ultimately at the mercy of the planet's raw power. Their story, echoed in the Atlantis legend, underscores a difficult truth that no amount of advancement can fully insulate a civilization from a catastrophic environmental shift. Today, we are not facing a single volcanic eruption, but a slow-moving crisis of our own making. The rising sea levels and intensifying weather patterns of our time are not the work of angry gods, but the measurable consequence of human activity. The allegory of hubris, of a people who believed they were masters of their world only to be humbled by it, has never felt more relevant. We see this in the relentless push for resources, the alteration of our atmosphere, and the assumption that our technology will always provide a shield. The legend transforms from a dusty mystery into a vital conversation with our own future. It asks us to consider what we are building and whether our own foundations are as stable as we believe. This is not about predicting a specific doom, but about recognizing a pattern. The most profound lesson from this lost world may not be about how a civilization falls, but about the choices it makes while it still stands. How do we balance our ambition with a deeper respect for the systems that sustain us? The silence at the bottom of the Aegean Sea offers no easy answers, only a powerful, enduring question. So we are left with a tapestry woven from many different threads. One thread is the vibrant, real-world civilization of the Minoans, an island kingdom of immense sophistication. Another is the undeniable geological fact of the Thura Eruption, a cataclysm of almost unimaginable power. A third is the plausible path this story could have traveled, from Egyptian scribes to the Greek lawgiver Solon, and finally to Plato himself. And surrounding it all is the global chorus of flood myths, a shared human memory of lands lost to the sea. When you weave these threads together, a startlingly coherent picture emerges. The argument is not that every single detail in Plato's account is a perfect factual match. After all, this story was passed down for nearly 1,000 years before he ever wrote it down. In the process of oral storytelling, details inevitably shift, sizes are exaggerated, and timelines can stretch or compress. We would not expect a perfect one-to-one correspondence. What we find, however, is a powerful alignment of the core narrative. An advanced island civilization, yes. A sudden, catastrophic destruction by both fire and water, yes. A disappearance beneath the waves, yes. The story's heart beats with the rhythm of this real historical event. It is as if the ancient world experienced a profound trauma, and centuries later, a philosopher gave that trauma a name, a face, and a moral. The legend of Atlantis endures not because it is a perfect, factual history, but because it is a profound and resonant echo of one. The geological and archaeological evidence provides the physical anchor, while the myth gives that evidence a human voice, a story of loss that continues to speak to us across the millennia. We began this journey with a single question: could the legend of Atlantis be more than just a story? The path of our investigation has led us through the ashes of a monumental volcanic eruption, across the waves of a prehistoric tsunami, and into the meticulous records of ancient philosophers. The evidence we have gathered points toward a resounding yes. The theory that the cataclysm at Thura inspired one of the world's most enduring myths stands as a powerful synthesis of science and storytelling. It reveals a profound truth about how human memory operates, taking the raw, terrifying stuff of real tragedy and slowly, over centuries, weaving it into the fabric of timeless legend. The search for Atlantis, then, is about so much more than finding a sunken city on a map. It is a search for our own collective past, a reflection on the awesome power of nature, and a testament to the incredible resilience of a story passed from one generation to the next. As our technology continues to improve, allowing us to explore the deepest parts of our history and the darkest reaches of our oceans, who can say what other lost worlds we may yet discover, what other echoes of real events are waiting within our oldest tales. The mystery of Atlantis endures not as a puzzle to be solved once and for all, but as a permanent invitation to keep questioning, to keep exploring, and to never stop imagining. If this journey through sunken worlds and ancient echoes has sparked your curiosity, We invite you to join our community of mystery seekers. Subscribing and tapping that notification bell ensures you are right there with us for our next investigation into history's greatest enigmas. We want to hear from you down in the comments. Does the link between Thura's fury and Plato's tale feel convincing to you, or does your mind wander to another potential inspiration for the lost continent? Your perspectives and questions are what make these discussions so fascinating, and we read every single one. After all, the most captivating legends are rarely pure fiction. They are often born from a real event, a shared memory of a world that was lost, its truth patiently waiting layer by layer for us to find it.